All right, good evening, and thank you all for coming tonight to talk about the water treatment plant. We'll kind of quick jump through what the agenda is. So first of all, we're planning on going through a presentation for the first portion of the meeting, and then from there we will do some question and answer. So on your table, there's a notepad that, is this microphone working? Yeah, okay, perfect. There's a notepad on the table for you to be able to write down questions. At the end, we'll plan on having staff go around and collect those questions, and then we will ask the questions and kind of have a panel going through that. So we'll kind of go through, so as a whole, we're going to go through just kind of some quick introductions, really how our water system currently works, some background on manganese, through the water system study that we conducted, and then kind of go through overall why we need a water treatment plant, some updates on the rates, and then kind of the project timing and everything like that. So first I'll kind of quick do some introductions. So I'm Justin Wagner, I'm the city's utilities manager. I've been with the city for 11 years full-time, and have been as a seasonal prior to that for about 5 years, so kind of total been with the city for about 16 years. Seth Peterson's over there, he's the design engineer from Bolton and Menk. And then Chris Kloss is in the back. She's from the Minnesota Department of Health, and she will kind of be talking about the health-based guidance for manganese. So to begin with, just kind of talking through the water system in general, and just going to go through kind of more like a water 101 and how our water system works itself. So really, in Northfield, we have 5 different wells. All those wells are pumping out of the Prairie du Chien or Jordan Aquifer. And then from there, basically you can see on this picture that's inside of one of our well houses. It gets pumped on the left-hand side, that pulls the water up to the surface. It's about 280 feet below ground is where the Prairie du Chien Jordan Aquifer is. Then it goes through the piping, and then we'll add 3 chemicals. So chlorine for disinfection purposes, a polyphosphate for sequestering iron and manganese, so basically making it so you don't see it in the water. And it also helps coat the inside of the pipe so there's not any corrosion issues. And then we also add fluoride for dental health reasons. From there, from that well house, it'll get pumped out into the distribution system. All those blue lines on here are the different pipes that are our main system throughout the whole city that gets pumped to everyone's house. And then also, everyone has their own individual service. That's how it actually gets into your house. So that's kind of just showing the distribution system. From there, it can either go directly into people's homes or into the water tower. And all of the wells go to everyone's house. So that water tower really is for 2 purposes, for firefighting and having just a storage of water. And then its main purpose is for pressure in your house. So just making it so when you turn on the faucet, you actually have enough pressure for everything. So that's kind of the quick water basic stuff. But then from there, where does it really go? So when it leaves your house, it will come to our wastewater treatment plant. So we currently have a wastewater treatment plant on the north side of town. In there, these are some different components. On the left-hand side's clarifier, and then on the right-hand side is our biological area filtration system. So basically the water goes in there, and we basically try to treat the water on one side, and then all the waste or solids we try to treat another way. The water on the left-hand side, you can see the water going over our final weir at the plant, how clear it is. So it's basically treating it so it gets very clean and meeting all of our permit regulations. And then on the right-hand side, all of our solids actually get land applied onto farmers' fields in the area. So that's kind of a quick water 101, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Close, and I'm from the Minnesota Department of Health, and I'm the supervisor there of the Health Risk Assessment Unit. So I'm first going to tell you about who we are, and then I'm going to tell you about what is health-based guidance. So that's what we're all about. And then we're going to just have some brief facts about manganese, what is it, and then why are we concerned, and then the health effects from manganese. So this is my group in the Health Risk Assessment Unit. We're a group of scientists, and what we do is we make health-based guidance. And that's, everything revolves around that. So we make guidance for chemicals found in water. We made the numbers for manganese. We're doing PFAS, if you've heard about PFAS in the news, so that comes through my group also. And everyone has different backgrounds, so everyone can approach this differently. So we all have different skills, and it's a great group of people to work with. So what is health-based guidance? So health-based guidance is the concentration of a contaminant in water. So for manganese, it's 100 micrograms per liter. That is likely to pose little or no health risk to people who drink the water, including sensitive and highly exposed populations. Usually, but not always, the highly exposed or sensitive populations are infants, young children, and pregnant women. So who gave us the authority to make water guidance? And it's the Minnesota legislature. So way back in 1989, they gave us authority through the Groundwater Protection Act. And so what it says is, it says the Minnesota Department of Health has to make health-based values for contaminants found in water that's used for drinking. And these health-based values are purely health-based. So we don't consider the cost to remove them. We don't consider the feasibility of doing it or anything like that. We just base our numbers on science and health. If that contaminant is found in water, it can go through what we call rulemaking, and then they become a health risk limit. If you've heard of PERLs or HRLs, that's what that is. If they're not found in Minnesota groundwater, it stays a health-based value. So the only difference is that it went through rulemaking, and some agencies like it in rulemaking, like the Pollution Control Agency. So again, it's expressed as a microgram of a contaminant per liter, so micrograms per liter. It's also known as a part per billion. So sometimes if you have wells or if you get notices, it might be in parts per billion. Okay, so manganese, what is it? So manganese actually occurs in the crust of the earth, and it's a naturally occurring element. So there's a picture of it, the ore. It's an essential nutrient, meaning that we all need it to survive. We don't make it ourselves, but we need it to survive. So we get it from eating vegetables, things grown in the earth. So you can see we need it for good health. And that's just kind of a picture. That's for the first time ever, I used artificial intelligence generator, and I made a picture of different things. So that is all Microsoft driven, not a real picture. I was really proud of myself. So we have like whole wheat bread, pineapples, green leafy vegetables, shellfish, chickpeas. So it's in potatoes, so it's in a lot of what we eat, and we need it. So if we don't have it, there's a deficit, but it's very rare that anyone is deficient in manganese because we can get it through so many foods. So it's a good thing. However, we know that too much of it can be a neurotoxin. So back in 1837, there was a study where they were looking at welders. So I had to look this up. Welders sometimes use manganese and steel to harden it, and then to make their lines or their cords, they put manganese in it to like strengthen the cords they use in welding. So in 1837 they were doing that, and after chronic exposure and high breathing in the vapors, welders became sick, and they all had similar traits that they were doing. They had a gait disorder, meaning they couldn't walk straight, they couldn't walk steady. They had tremors, a whispering speech, so it wasn't strong. They had facial muscle spasms, and then cognitive impairment. So that was the first indication that you can have too much of a good thing, right? And this was breathing it in. So these were people who were exposed chronically through work, and they were breathing in lots and lots of amounts of manganese. So why are we concerned? I mean, we don't breathe it in here, it's just in our foods, and we get enough from food and water. So we're all good with that. We're all healthy because we can get manganese from food and water. It's more easily absorbed from water than food. So if it's in the water you drink, your body absorbs most of it instead of just getting rid of it. But the one thing we're concerned about is the infants. So that population that's under 1 year of age, they drink more water per body weight than any other population. So if you look at the graph on the right, on the bottom, you have the age going up. So the first 3 lines are birth to less than 1 month. Then the second blue line is 1 month to 3 months old. The third is 3 to 6 months old. And then by the time you get up to the 4th one, it's up to 1 year. And on the left going up, that is the amount of water they're drinking per body weight. So you can see that between birth and about 6 months of age, those babies drink a lot of water, right? Fluids per body weight. So they're the ones that's most highly exposed because for their little bodies, they're consuming a lot of water. And if there's manganese in that water, they're consuming a lot of manganese. So they're at greater risk. And the other point I want to make is they're at greater risk because they're rapidly growing and developing. Their organs aren't mature like adults, right? So they're new, they're learning how to function. So babies absorb more manganese in their gut and in their brain than adults do, but they don't have the way to eliminate it as efficiently as adults. So it stays in their bodies longer, so they're exposed longer than adults are. An interesting point is that breast milk levels are below 15 micrograms per liter. So now you can kind of look, we're putting a limit on it for 100 micrograms per liter for babies, but in breast milk it's only 15. And we know, we did a study, we wanted to know how much was in formula. So manganese is added to formula because it's an essential nutrient. Remember, everybody needs manganese. But we were just shocked. The Food and Drug Administration, they put a minimum level to put into the infant formula, but not a maximum level. So nobody wants to make formula with not enough manganese in it because then it'll get pulled. So there's a wide range from 70 micrograms per liter up to 700 micrograms per liter. And it actually went by what type of formula it was. So cow's milk had the lower end. The middle to high end was soy milk, believe it or not. I think it's because it's coming from fields. And then the highest were those poor babies that need amino acid-based formula. So those are babies that can't process proteins. And those are the ones that are sickest. Those are the ones that were getting the highest amount of manganese. So there's a problem there. And we've been talking with the FDA about it. And it's not on their radar, let me tell you that. But what is on our radar is that we can do something about it, right? Because we know that we can, if we remove it from the water, then the babies who are breastfeeding will just get their 15 micrograms per liter, and then everyone else is just limited to the formula you buy, and you can change the formula you buy, right? So infants are the sensitive life stage and have the highest exposure. I just had to tell you that because I find that very interesting. So if that's too much for you, it's okay. We're going on now. So here's the health effects. So our number is based on data from animal studies because that is the most controlled studies there are, right? You can have animals that have no exposure to animals that have low, medium, and high exposure. So we base a lot of our work on animal studies. So young laboratory animals, usually they're mice and rats, had neurological effects such as decreased learning. So you put them in a maze, they can't figure out where they're going or it takes them longer. Behavioral changes, so maybe they don't stay in the group like they do, maybe they're going off on their own, and then motor skills. So maybe they can't like walk their line straight. To go with this, there are now epidemiology studies coming out of young children. And they're finding there with young children, these are epidemiology studies, so they're not controlled. So it could be from manganese, it could be because there's something else in their water or something they're exposed to. That's the problem with epidemiology studies, is that there's other exposures, right? Not just manganese. But what those association is with subtle neurobehavioral changes. So small changes in memory, concentration, motor skills, and IQ. So we're kind of seeing a mirror of what's happening in animal studies. So that kind of gives us pretty good confidence that we are seeing manganese as a neurotoxicant at elevated levels. So based on the animal studies and the epi studies, 100 micrograms per liter is what the limit is for infants, and then everyone else up to 300 micrograms per liter. Okay, so that's the end of mine. I'm going to pass it on, but if you do have questions, I'm saying here. And you can also contact the Department of Health too, and we can pull studies for you if you want to know details, and you can ask my team questions and we'll find the answers for you, okay? All right, thank you.
All right, so I think Chris probably did a good enough job touching kind of what manganese, but I figured I'd also just kind of point out, so on that right-hand side of the back of the toilet, that's really what you're visibly going to see. It's the black substance in your water. Most of the time you don't see it because we add that polyphosphate into our water, but if it sits long enough, it will start to come out and you will actually start to see that black in there. Or if you have any in-home filters or anything like that, typically that black color that's in there, that's from that manganese. So then really, back in 2019, the city, as part of the UCMR, which is Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule 4, we had to test manganese in our drinking water. So we tested 3 of our wells. 3 of those wells, or 2 of the 3 wells that we tested had elevated levels of manganese above that 100 micrograms per liter that Chris was talking about for infants. So from there we ended up testing again in 2020, and then we actually ended up testing ourselves throughout all of 2020 just to get a little bit more in-house data. So you can see the different levels in all of our wells. If you guys all, there is more room up here if anyone wants to sit down. More than welcome to mingle in and kind of move through. So some up front and kind of scattered around. So again, thanks for coming. So as far as manganese levels, you can kind of see it on all of our wells, or 4 of the 5 wells. They're 3 of them are over. 1 of them we had multiple levels in the 97 micrograms per liter. So it didn't hit over that 100 micrograms per liter. But all of these wells, the water really mixes together in the system and it goes to your tap. So there's not really a way for us to just send water from one of those wells. And then I will note that one level on well 4, that was that 344 micrograms per liter. With manganese being kind of more of a particle, you can get kind of bigger chunks of it at times in the samples. So talking with the Department of Health, we thought it was really a kind of a poor sample. We still have to put that out there of what the level actually was. But it really had a larger chunk in there that probably caused that higher level. So then also on top of that, just not only testing our well sites, we tested 5 different locations throughout the city, some in homes, some businesses. And with testing them, we didn't really document any of the type of treatments those systems had. We just went and wanted to test what the water was that the people there were drinking. So we asked the 5 different locations. 4 of those 5 sites had levels in their houses or businesses that were above that 100 micrograms per liter. So it wasn't just at the well source, it was throughout town, and that was on multiple sides of the city that had that elevated level. So then from there, we wanted to kind of go through a water system study, which was conducted in 2021 and 2022. And really the purpose of that water system study was to figure out a way that we could lower the level of manganese in our drinking water so that we can make it safe for everyone to drink and not have to put out a notice to people that if you have infants, they shouldn't be drinking the tap water unless you're further treating it. So we looked at different ways. Kind of the first overarching thing was, are there any simple ways that we can just do it where there's not major ways? Can we treat at each well site? Really, we can't treat at each individual well site because we don't have enough land at all of those sites. And with having 4 of the different wells that are right at that level, it would be very difficult to have 4 separate treatment plants that would all have to be fairly large in size to be able to provide enough water to all of our residents. And then we also looked, can we just drill new wells? Because obviously you saw in there's different levels. Well, the one well, so well number 2 was actually a dual aquifer well. So that's our only well that we have that's open. Basically there's a casing underground that it's open in both the Prairie du Chien aquifer and the Jordan aquifer. So when it's open to both of those, it's more susceptible to groundwater influences and stuff that's taking place on the surface. So actually that well has elevated levels of nitrates, so we actually have to test every quarter for the nitrates, and there were not over any health risk for it, but it does have elevated levels. The other 4 wells are all strictly in the Jordan Aquifer, and that's why they're kind of fairly consistent with what the levels are on those wells. So really, those weren't great options. So it was really decided that the only way to really treat the manganese and remove it was to treat at a central treatment plant location. So when we did that water system study, we looked at 3 different treatment options. So the first treatment option was just a gravity filtration system. So that really, what it would do is lower the levels of iron and manganese in the water, and it was the least expensive option, but it was still fairly expensive at the time. The second option that we looked at was lime softening with gravity filtration. That would lower the levels of manganese, iron, and also hardness, so that would make it soft drinking water as well. But that was the most expensive, and it would take the most operating costs to do that, because typically a lot of cities are running those either 24 hours a day, or some of the newer systems that have it, you are able to leave and let it operate on its own, but there's a lot more operating costs to that. And then the third option was the gravity filtration with reverse osmosis. So that would lower the levels of manganese, iron, the hardness, and then any future unknown contaminants, and PFAS being a big one. It would lower the levels of nitrates in that well 2 that we have. And it provides us with the most resilient option going forward and making sure that we can meet any and all future guidance. So that was really what the final recommendation came. As well, through the whole study, we looked at multiple different siting options. So if you look on there, so not sure if you can see that great, that top middle spot is near Spring Creek Elementary. That was the original spot in 1970 for the city to build a water treatment plant. So it was planned to build it when we built our well number 3 at that location. When they took the test, the level of iron in the water was not high enough that they decided not to build a water treatment plant there. But at that time, obviously in 1970, that was the average. So there wasn't half that parcel where you see there's a line on there. The top parcel was in city limits, the bottom parcel was not in city limits. So it was basically a slough that the field was in at that point. So we looked at that site since that property was purchased specifically for a water treatment plant back in 1970. Then we looked at 2 other options, well, technically 3, but it was really looking at near Hall Avenue, near our water tower, which is on the far right of the slide, and then also looking on the south side of Maple Street. So it was trying to look at areas that are fairly close to our wells, which all of these spots are, but far enough away that it wouldn't cause any immediate impact to residents. So as we went through those, here's kind of a little bit more in-depth detail on those different options that we looked at during the water system study. So this was showing our option 1A next to our water treatment plant, next to our water tower on Hall Avenue. This ultimately was the selected option. Then the second option was really looking at on what would be the south side of future Jefferson Parkway, still right next to our water tower off of Hall Avenue. The next option was really looking at the south side of Maple Street, also outside of city limits. And then the last location was looking at near that Spring Creek Elementary. So when we went through this study, we did multiple engagement sessions and trying to get public input on that. We sent out notices to a lot of the adjacent property owners. And from that, I think we had around 120 people respond to a survey. We overwhelmingly heard that we did not want to have the treatment plant at this well 3 site or the Spring Creek Elementary site, just because it's been 50 years where it's been a neighborhood park. So it's used for athletic fields, but it's also used heavily by the school and big time sledding and everything like that. So we listened to that, and that ultimately was not a recommended site for the water treatment plants. So then, as well during the water system study, we kind of were just looking at what different sustainable actions we can really take with the water treatment plant, because going from not having a water treatment plant to having one is a large energy consumer. And we had just adopted our climate action plan from the city, and we were trying to figure out a few aspects on that. So through it, the sustainability aspect, it was really looking at we should use the Envision program, which basically is a water treatment design program that would really make sure that we're using kind of more sustainable measures and making sure that we're treating the water as well as we can, but also doing it with the least amount of energy consumption as we can. And then we also, as part of that public engagement on the siting option, we looked at different solar options, and we overwhelmingly heard from residents that they did not want solar to be ground mounted, so they wanted it to just be roof mounted. So based on that input and recommendation, that's what ultimately was recommended through the water system study. So kind of, again, touching on all the recommendations on that water system study, it was to construct a water treatment plant that was gravity filtration with reverse osmosis, and then leave that green space next to Spring Creek Elementary. It was preferred option 1 near Hall Avenue, which is obviously the selected location, was the preferred location for the water treatment plant, and then to install roof-mounted solar and not install ground-mounted solar. So then from there, so that was accepted by the City Council in 2022. From there, we kind of went through negotiations with property owners and to buy land. So as part of that negotiation, we will be constructing Jefferson Parkway on the southern boundary of our water treatment plant, and new north-south road on the east side of the water treatment plant boundary. So kind of getting into the water treatment plant design itself. So again, kind of reiterating the why do we need a water treatment plant. It's really for that health-based guidance for infants 1 and under, or under 1 I should say. And then, like I've said, our recommendation is that infants should not drink City of Northfield water. We've put out numerous public notices on that in the past. Typically we're sending out stuff every year, and we've also had communication with like Northfield Hospital and Clinics and Alliant Clinic to have them make sure that any families that do have new infants, that they should be notifying them that really they should not be drinking any tap water unless they're further treating it at their house. So we've had that communication with them, and they are ongoing notifying families that are having children in town. And then obviously that water treatment plant itself will really provide that water under the health-based guidance. So the gravity filtration will lower the levels of manganese, and the reverse osmosis will further reduce that, and then also help with some other things. So then, talking through on the water treatment plant itself, what other things besides manganese and iron will it kind of lower? So like I said, the manganese will not only get below this health-based guidance of 100 micrograms per liter, it will also go below the EPA's secondary standard, which is an aesthetic standard, so where you actually start to see that in the back of the toilets or to see it in your water. So it'll be below the EPA's secondary standard. On top of that, which it's not mentioned up here, but Health Canada in the last 3 years has come out with a new regulation that if you have water above 120 micrograms per liter, you have to filter it. So Canada is mandating it. So the levels that we have in our water, we would actually be mandated to treat it if it was in Canada. Obviously we are not, but that's kind of just more a notice that a lot of other places are looking at this. European Union, they have a kind of a similar thing for aesthetic base for under 50 micrograms per liter. So it's kind of a common item that has been looked at in the last few years. And then it will also lower the hardness in the water below the EPA secondary standard. So it won't go to fully soft water. We're going from about 17 grains per gallon down to about 5.5 grains per gallon. So that when it's at 5.5 grains per gallon, Minnesota Department of Health recommends that you have a water softener if you're above 7 grains per gallon. So we will be below that level. And then it really is providing a high quality of water to all residents. So there's people that do not have access to having water softeners in their home, or if they have a rental unit, they don't necessarily have the ability to have that. So this ensures that anyone has that safe water. If people come to your house or visiting and you don't have a filter at your house, you still are providing that safe water to your grandkids or to your kids or anything like that. So it's anyone showing up, you still have water that is safe for everyone. And then it really protects Northfield's water from really any future unknown contaminant. PFAS is probably the biggest one that you're hearing in the news right now. We do have a variety of it, PFBA, in all 5 of our wells at a very low level, 5 parts per trillion. So a very, very low level. PFBA, there's health-based guidance of 7,000 parts per trillion, but we do obviously have those small traces that have detected in all 5 of our wells. It also, like I said, it pulls out the nitrates in the water, so our well 2, that would be below any guidance level, and we would make sure that it's always safe. And the positive with that, with having the reverse osmosis system, it allows us to continue to use all of these wells with us not having to drill new wells. So we can continue to use the existing infrastructure and not have to construct new stuff to make sure that we actually are meeting these guidelines. There's kind of a lot of information on here, so I apologize, it's probably a little small back there. This is kind of just talking through some of the future-proofing items of our water system on here. So, and a lot of the key things that were just really looked at when it relates to the water treatment plant itself. So we're making sure that we're looking into the future for making sure that the plant is built for any future population. It's built to allow an additional expansion on it so that we can meet future requirements in the city when we get to that time. It's going to be more resilient as a system, so it'll have dual raw water main lines, so all the wells will have to go directly from, the water will have to go from the wells to the treatment plant, and then we'll push it back out to residents, so everyone will be getting that treated water. So through that reverse osmosis, like I said, it treats nitrates, PFAS, chlorides, and pretty much anything new that's coming out, it will be able to lower those levels. We also are planning for adding 2 additional wells at the treatment plant location that we purchased. So we don't need those today, but we're making sure that while we're designing it, there's space and capacity that we can actually add those wells to the site and be able to make sure that we're still providing that safe drinking water. Like I've talked through some of the sustainability items, it's going to be energy efficient. The surfaces themselves, there'll be some impervious surfaces. It'll connect in with our Jefferson Parkway, and kind of just, it provides a lot of things and kind of meets a lot of our goals through our comp plan and everything on that end. So really looking through, this is kind of more of a site plan that you can kind of see more on our landscape site plan. It's really, right now it's, if you can kind of see out there, the main portion of the area is kind of native prairie pollinators. So we're not really looking to have added mowing area. There's going to be some bee lawn that's on the edge of a lot of the hard surfaces so that we can maintain more of an aesthetic pleasing area and stuff, so it's not overgrowing onto any of those walkways, but still having more native and less maintenance from a staff perspective. There's going to be a lot of stormwater treatment on the site, so we'll be able to treat all of the rainwater and all the new impervious surface. And really it's just kind of the whole overarching picture here is that it's showing that it's really looking at trying to make sure that this is a sustainable building and kind of meeting some of our sustainability goals into the future. So that's kind of more on the whole water treatment plant itself. Talking through federal funding. So positive, the city was awarded about $4 million for our water treatment plant. So we did secure that, and that's for fiscal year 2024 is how it's appropriated. And then after that, so I should back up. In 2022, we applied for fiscal year 2023 for $33.5 million. And really we were looking to get 3/4 of that, so really it was only $25 million we were trying to get from the federal government for helping to construct this water treatment plant. We were able to get that first $4 million. And then from there, how the project was going to work, we needed to make sure that it was a feasible project to try to get that funding. So we tried to get that additional $29 million because we were, because that's what the federal government pretty much said the max amount of money we would be able to get was, but we were not successful attaining that. So really from there, we've applied for low interest loans through the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. We will be able to get those. So that's a positive note. And they tend to be quite a bit lower than what you're able to get on the open market for interest rates. So looking through the total project cost, so on here it's kind of showing that construction costs are roughly about $51 million for the water treatment plant itself. So that's roadways included, raw water main, sewer extension, solar, everything like that, and the treatment plant itself. So then you add in all the contingencies, engineering and land, and it's close to $60 million is what the total project cost is. If you pull out that $4 million, it's around $56 million for the water treatment plant. So really kind of more once you have that number, it's trying to figure out how is this going to affect us going forward and how is it going to affect the water user with your water rates. So looking through, once we had those numbers on what the plant was, we did a rate analysis. It was showing that a 28% increase for the next 4 years would be needed to fund it, and then a 3% for 4 years, and then 2% after that. I will say that is not only for the water treatment plant, that is for all water infrastructure capital improvement plans. So we have a water tower that's planned through there, there's water tower paintings, there's meter replacement, there's any road construction that is getting any water infrastructure on that. So it's not strictly for the water treatment plant, it's for all water projects that are planned. So that's kind of showing all of those. So really, how is this gonna, that 28%, it's kind of hard to figure out, but how's it gonna affect individuals? So in 2024, the average water user uses about 589 cubic feet of water per month. So the current water cost is about $20.27 per month. And then 2028, when those larger increases will be done, it'll be about $54 a month. In 2030, it'll be about that $57 a month. You can see these are all, this is a full utility bill, so it's showing water, sewer, garbage, and stormwater. So from 2024, that would go from about $83 up to 2030 for $140 for the full utility bill. So then kind of talking through specifically the reverse osmosis portion of the water treatment plant. So really why is the city going to soften the water? But more specifically, why are we going to use reverse osmosis for softening it? So as you all know, if you have a water softener at your house, softening water, the reason we do it is because it can, the calcium and magnesium in the water can basically cause scale and build up in your pipes. It makes your skin and hair dry. And you see it on your dishes when they dry and everything like that. So soft water prevents that. But the reverse osmosis system specifically removes PFAS or forever chemicals and any future unknown contaminants. It'll provide that high quality water to all residents, like I've said. And then it provides softened water to all residents who currently don't have access to that, whether it's in rental units or they just don't have access to it in their home. And then residents will also be able to remove their in-home water softener, so that'll be a big thing, and then you don't really have to haul in that bag of salt every month to your water softener. If you do, or when the water softeners, whether they're reprogrammed or removed, it will provide less chlorides being discharged to the Canyon River, which obviously helps with our wastewater treatment plants, since we do have a permit out there, and we will be getting regulations on our wastewater treatment plant for making sure that we are testing for and monitoring the levels of chlorides in our discharge at the wastewater treatment plant. And the big portion for it is the city can provide that softened water to all residents for about $8 a month, which is pretty much the cost of one bag of salt per month. So, and that's typically what a resident is using. Then you wouldn't have that capital cost of having a new water softener or bringing that salt into your home, like I've said. So here's kind of comparing in 2028, the top bar is showing what the city is going to have for rates. So that's really what our system will be with the gravity filtration and reverse osmosis. So that average of around $54 a month. And then the bottom bar, the blue portion, is showing if we would not build that reverse osmosis portion of the facility. And then green portion showing what it costs for residents to soften the water. I would say this, we did a fairly low estimate on what a water softener costs and typically what residents are using for salt. But that pulls that average up to about $66 a month is what people are spending or would be spending for having a water softener still in their home, and the city not choosing to do that reverse osmosis. The other big thing with it, like I've said, all those other reasons why we're looking at the reverse osmosis, it really provides us with that resiliency and making sure that we are protected as a water system and we don't have anything that comes down the pipe that we really can't treat for. So then really looking through and showing kind of some comparable cities. Obviously we're in the green there. Like I said, at 28, our rates will be right around that $54 a month for your water rate. The cities, so St. Peter, Robbinsdale, and Marshall are all cities that have constructed water treatment plants fairly recently. So we are going to be kind of in that same era of treatment plant where it's a newer water treatment plant. So we compare very much so with those cities. Mankato and Eden Prairie have had a water treatment plant that filters or that softens the water for a very long time. So that's why their rates are a little lower, and Fairmont has, I think they're fairly hard on their water, or have fairly hard water, I should say. So they just have a little bit higher of a rate. So kind of showing just some project influence where we're at. So on the left-hand side, this is kind of just showing at the point of when we're on project. The green line is really showing how much cost it is for doing items, and then the blue line is really showing for an opportunity for influence. The far left is basically starting at a plan for doing that, or the comprehensive plan on where we start with the project. Moving further into it is kind of budgeting for it, and as you get further along, the cost goes up with any minor changes. Really, in 2023, when we went out through Bolton and Menk and got a contract with them to start design, that was kind of the point where the project was moving forward. So the plant will be moving forward. And right now we're at the point where the plans are basically done, the plans and specifications are done, and we're going to be moving into bidding the water treatment plant here next month. So project timeline, left-hand side, anything that's kind of grayed out is already stuff that's kind of taking place, going through the water system study, the recommendations, and through the design of the water treatment plant. We're kind of at that green point now for the open house tonight, and then on November 12th, it'll go to council for approving the plans and specifications and then ordering the pad for bid, and on January 7th, the bids will go to council for approval. And then construction of the water treatment plant will take place from 2025 to 2027. So with that, we're going to have a few staff that are going to kind of start walking around, collecting the questions that you have. If you have anything that was not answered, please write it down on that piece of paper and give it to staff. And then we'll kind of have a panel answering some of those questions. So while the questions are going to be asked, I'm just going to kind of go through a few of the questions that we we've been kind of hearing from the public. So a question that we've kind of been hearing. Can you hear me now? All right. So yeah, some of the questions we've been kind of hearing. You understand? Yeah. It is.
We may need the Department of Health too to help answer some of these questions too. Do manganese levels fluctuate throughout the year? The question was, do manganese levels fluctuate throughout the year?
I'd say so. In that 2020 timeframe, like we had said, all of our samples were fairly consistent. They were, 20 or so micrograms per liter different at times, but throughout the year they were very consistent.
This one is more on the waste treatment side. When you put the waste from the treatment system onto the farmland, what are you adding back?
So the biosolids that's put on the wastewater from the wastewater treatment plant, that's basically just all of the solids that are in the wastewater, and then we basically make it into a Class A exceptional quality product by adding a lime to the product. So that product itself goes onto the field. Nothing will go onto the fields from the water treatment plant itself.
Second manager. How big will the population be for this system? How many?
We would be able to get that information for you. I don't have that.
It's 20 years. The facility is designed for 20 years into the future. We have those populations of what we designed it for. I don't have that with me right tonight.
You can maybe answer. Why did the federal funds say no? My take is it's very competitive to get federal funding, and we were not selected in the second round or in this year.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Can you add what you heard about federal funding?
Yeah, and so I'll say once we had further conversations with our state or our federal elected officials, they kind of brought up that there has never been a project that's been awarded multiple rounds of funding, which we did not find out until after we already had received the first round of funding. So kind of found out we were not going to get, or we were not as likely to get it from there.
Dave, will you just project a little bit more to the mic, please? Thank you.
How did you pick Marshall, Fairmont, and Eden Prairie as comps?
So those were cities that had softeners. So we were trying to grab cities that already softened their water.
After the water plant is built, will the city provide assistance for homeowners to remove their existing softeners?
So I think we would actually be looking at different options for that. So there have been some grants awarded to some cities that they have been able to collect some funds and get grant assistance to remove some of those in-home water softeners or keep your water softener and help with changing the level of, or levels on your softener so it's actually meeting what the level of hardness we'll be putting out with the water. So we're going to look into that. Hopefully we're able to obtain some of that.
Justin, could you elaborate on that, explain why this state or feds might fund some of that?
Yeah, so the reason they want to fund that is really on the wastewater side. So they want to eliminate the amount of chlorides that are going into the waste stream. So chlorides can have some issues with, I believe it's for wild rice is what chlorides can cause issues for. So throughout the state, they're trying to minimize the level of chlorides being discharged into the river.
Will the new plant allow a lower level of chlorine in the water?
I would say the chlorine level will probably stay the same within the system. That's just the level of chlorine that we have is really to make sure that we have chlorine throughout the whole distribution system, so the farthest points of the system are getting disinfected and making sure that we're providing safe water to everyone.
Do other cities in the Jordan Aquifer use similar treatment plants?
So I would say there are some systems that have similar. Most cities in the state our size do have treatment plants already. So we've been very fortunate that we have not had a water treatment plant to this point. There are not that many cities that don't have them when you're a population of our size. But yes, a lot of cities do have treatment plants that are in the Jordan Aquifer.
After the city lost the federal grant, why was it decided to move forward?
So the city is moving forward with the water treatment plant because we want to provide safe drinking water for all. So it's making sure that we can provide that safe water to, regardless of whoever is here, at the tap, so they can actually get that safe drinking water that they need. And it's a kind of like a necessity to have safe drinking water for everyone, because everyone consumes water and needs it.
How long will the water bills be increased for the water plant?
So I think that was the 4 years early, that timeline for the larger increases. The other percent increases are not necessarily only for the water treatment plant, but they're also for all of the water projects.
I would say it's a 20-year low-interest loan from the state, so after the 20 years, the main debt payment for the plant would come off. Did we investigate retrofitting homes?
So typically with in-home systems, there's not a lot of in-home systems that will lower the level that are at your drinking water system. So water softeners themselves do lower the levels of manganese, but most people do not have that to their tap water because they don't like the taste of salt. So typically you don't have that on your drinking water based on the taste. Then reverse osmosis, people do have point source reverse osmosis, but the city's job is really to provide safe drinking water to all. So if you have people over to your house, like I said, they would not be able to drink the water if they're infants, if they aren't there. So we didn't really look into specifically treating at the sites or at homes, but like I said, the goal is really to make sure that we're providing safe drinking water to all, and we would still be notifying all residents that the water is unsafe to drink for infants if we would go down the road of treating at homes.
We just bought a brand new softener and RO system. Will we be required to stop using it? Will we be reimbursed?
You would not be required to stop using it. I'll say we're going to recommend that people stop using them, but they would not have to stop using them. And the RO themselves would have that. You could continue to use that on your drinking water side if you wanted. Most likely you wouldn't have to, you wouldn't waste as much water if you're still using them, because if you change the regeneration cycles to the hardness level that you have, you're not wasting as much, and your filters most likely you wouldn't have to change out as often.
We just moved here a year ago. How does the city communicate this to its residents?
So we put public notices out on this in the past. We continue to have a lot of dialogue on the water treatment plant, and the local newspaper and radio have been very generous, providing a lot of information on this. And then, like I said, if people are having new children, the clinics throughout town, they are notifying families that they should be treating their water additionally at their site.
Can any of the items be eliminated from the project?
I would say at this point, no, everything is planned to move forward.
I mean, I could add on, certainly when we go to council for approval, if they would want to make a decision to change or modify the project, certainly that'd be a council decision to consider doing that. Will the archery range be built elsewhere in Northfield? I can answer that. So it's at review at the park board, so they're discussing Meadows Park, so there'll be some information going out to residents and getting feedback and looking at a location for potential relocation of the archery range.
I'd add on that cost. So really we went through and did that value engineering and try to get lower cost for engineering. We went through and looked at those different treatment options. There was public engagement throughout that whole time trying to look at those different options. At that time, when we did the water system study, that's where it was selected to have that system. And it was really looking at, with the land purchase agreement, we have to build the roads with, there's also offices and garage being proposed with that because currently we have stuff that's staffed and items are in 5 different locations. It's trying to improve efficiencies on all of those. So a lot of those things were evaluated during that water system study, and that's where it got to the current design portion.
I think this was covered on a slide, but we could jump back. How much will a homeowner have to pay?
So yeah, the average homeowner currently is at $27 per month for their water bill, or for their water portion of the water bill. In 2030, it would be that $57 per month for their water bill.
How many people actually use 569 or 589 cubic feet? You're saying that's the average. How many people are getting by with that?
That's the average residential use in town. So average number of people, we have roughly 6,000 properties in town. So that average use is at 589. So I would say from typical standards, I would guess that's around that 2.5 people per household.
How soon will construction begin on Jefferson Parkway?
So Jefferson Parkway is planned to start sometime next year or the following, so it's going to be bid out separately as a project. So that will be, like I said, in 2025 and 2026. And there already is some capital improvement, mill and overlay taking place on Jefferson Parkway in 2026.
The project costs increased significantly. Is it appropriate to revisit the plan?
So I think the main goal for the city was to really treat the water and make sure that we're providing that safe drinking water to all. With the project cost increase, since COVID, we've been seeing a 10% increase every year. Every year that you wait, every project has been going up that 10% additional cost for it. So waiting would just prolong the cost and really get it out there. As well, the project itself, it's making sure that we have enough water to supply to residents both now and that 20-year life of the system. So
You did a cost benefit analysis as part of the water study 2 years ago when it was at 30 million or whatever the number was at that time. Now it's 60 million. Isn't it appropriate to maybe revisit whether the RO system is really needed versus just the gravity filtration? Because of the
We're going to continue through the questions. And what do most residents soften their water to in their homes, and what will the new plant soften the water to?
I think it depends on what a resident really wants their water softened to. If you want to go to true soft water, it's below 1 grain per gallon. The new plant itself will be at 5.5 grains per gallon. I would say a lot of other cities, this is a typical level of hardness that cities are putting out that do soften the water, and a lot of people do not have water softeners in those cities.
What is the state of the Jordan Aquifer? Is the level falling due to lack of rainfall or low rainfall?
I'll say we look at our groundwater levels every day. It's really staying stable. It isn't really changing much. I know Seth has done some larger studies throughout the area, and he's actually seen some increase, very small amounts of increase over the last 20 years, because really 2006 was kind of the early like 2005 to 2010 was really the largest pumping years in the state history, just because of efficiency in water systems. So your toilets, your shower heads, irrigation systems, all of those are a lot more efficient now. So actually our water consumption, we've been going down since then. Now we're fairly stable with how much water we're consuming per year. But our highest year for us, I believe, was 2008. So Jordan Aquifer is staying fairly stable.
This may be the wastewater plant, but could the wastewater plant be improved so it's treatable to make it potable water for drinking?
So I don't believe Minnesota has an allowance for going back to a true water reuse system. There are some states that do have that available now, but Minnesota, there is no guidance to allow for that.
Please explain the reverse osmosis process.
So the reverse osmosis itself, it's basically a membrane filter. So you basically push the water through this filter that blocks any particles from being able to pass through it. So it basically makes it that they cannot penetrate through it. So you don't allow the iron or manganese or PFAS or nitrates or items of that nature to actually be able to penetrate through the system. I'll add while Dave's kind of reading through some of the questions. So this is going to be posted to our project page, so we have this recorded. So we will be posting it to there, and you will be able to see it there. There's also an option if you want to sign up for additional updates on the water treatment plant project itself. You can do that on the project website. If you just go to the city's webpage, northfieldmn.gov, and just type in water treatment plant, it should bring you to that project page.
Just to clarify, though, I don't know if they explained it, but Dave's looking for duplicates as far as going through the questions. So out of respect to people's times, if it appears the question's already asked, he's skipping through some of them.
Was the study of manganese happening at the state at the same time the federal government was giving out grants?
So that study for manganese was taking place, or basically that health-based guidance came out in, I want to say it was 2019. So the federal funds that we requested, we obviously requested those the past few years. So they were not at the exact same time, but I think the federal government does provide funds at different portions or different times, and you can apply for grants different ways. So.
Why are you rushing this decision?
I would say the decision for the plant, it's been ongoing for 5 years. So obviously we were looking at the water treatment plant back in 2019 and really how to treat it. We could have at that point just gone through and actually looked at saying, we know we have these elevated levels, the easiest way would be to treat it, but we went through a 2-year study to really see what's best for Northville and how best we could actually lower those levels. So we've been doing that. We've been going through the design of the water treatment plant. That's been about a 1.5-year process. So I would say it has not been rushed at all.
Ben Mardick, City Administrator, just to add to Justin's comments too, actually the project's probably been delayed trying to seek these federal funds, and had we been able to keep going for more money, this project would have been further delayed, probably into next year. So based on where we're just basically following the project sequence, and as we're seeking funding, it actually delayed things. So we're not accelerating the decision making, it's been delayed on.
Has anyone been diagnosed with an illness?
I would probably defer to the Department of Health for that one.
Yeah, we should have them come up here too. Dave, have them come to the mic.
Yeah, we have no way of knowing that because we don't collect that information. So there's no way of knowing whether or not, I mean, if your child is having behavioral or motor issues, you would just bring them to the physician and, you know, they would treat. So there's no way, there's no studies done in this area about it.
Have there been any human studies done rather than just rats and mice?
No, not that I'm aware of right now.
So there's been no human studies saying,
Oh, there's human studies out there, and
Please repeat the question.
okay, the question was, has there been any recent new studies? And that, is that, what's it? On humans. On humans. When we did our paper on, or when we published our findings with the powdered infant formula, the latest study was on a group of children, and I don't even remember the city they were in, but they had elevated manganese in their water, and they were following the IQ. And they found that as the manganese levels went up, the IQ went down. And it was, girls were more sensitive than boys. And that was occurring somewhere around that 300, 200 area, micrograms per liter. But that's one study. So we don't have additional studies to support that right now. And in science, you need to have multiple studies that support that.
you talked about an illness called
We're going to keep the cards.
We're going to keep running through the cards here.
I asked that question in one of the cards, though. You talked about an illness called magnesium. Has anybody at the Northville Hospital been diagnosed?
Oh, that was manganism. So right now, OSHA and places like that are well aware of fumes that you could get through welding. So people who weld are well aware of that now. So I assume that OSHA and other places like that are watching out for that now.
Have we spoke to the largest water users in the community?
Yes, we have. So we've had communication with them. I'll say, I have not had recent communication, but when we had communication, they were all happy to hear that the water was actually going to be filtered because they have a lot of additional treatment that they do at their sites.
How do you clean the reverse osmosis membrane, and what happens to the material?
So for cleaning them, you basically backwash them and you can add a chemical to help clean them. The material that's not used through it basically will go to the wastewater treatment system. So really when we pump the water out of the ground, for every 1 gallon that goes through the system, it's about 1.1 to 1.2 gallons that we need to get that 1 gallon out. So it's about a 10% loss of the total water that gets pumped would go to the sewer system. We do expect that number, so that's just on the treatment side. We do expect with residents lowering their softener settings or removing their softeners that we would actually pump less than that 10% additional water just because those efficiencies would be lowered.
Are there grants from the state of Minnesota?
So there typically are not grants for water treatment plants for this type of treatment. So mainly they are low interest loans. So that's kind of what we're seeking from the Minnesota Department of Health.
How will this project affect the water flowing into Spring Creek, the ponds and watershed, and the amount of water in Spring Creek? The need to increase the ability of water to flow to prevent the ponds from flooding and increase the floodplain in Spring Creek.
This shouldn't have any effect on Spring Creek, on any of that area. So the water itself, the waste off of it goes to the wastewater treatment plant, so that won't go into there.
And I could add, so all that impervious area that's added, so we're constructing ponds to control the rate of water, so we're not increasing the rate, and we're discharging clean water from the site. Could you discuss irrigation systems and second meters and how that stuff works?
Yeah, so in Northville we have the option to have 2 separate meters at your house. Your main meter basically charges you for water and sewer consumption. If you want to have a second meter, That second meter would only charge you for the water being used that goes onto the irrigation system. So the water rate itself is the same rate from however you consume it. So it's the same cost for any water, but you just would not get that sewer charge if you have that second meter.
Justin, do they need to hire a plumber or something to do some of that work too, or?
Yeah, typically a plumber would do that work for you. You have to go through the building official to get your system plumbed differently, and then the city would come out and do an inspection on your how it's plumbed to make sure that we're billing you properly, and you have to buy that second meter yourself. And there's also a monthly charge for having that second meter since there's ongoing maintenance for that.
Do you have data showing the percent of people affected by the new health-based guidance from the Department of Health? I'm seeing a head in the back say not. Does the city have lead pipes?
Yes, we do have some lead services in town. We're working on our service line inventory right now. A lot of you probably got a letter from me earlier this summer trying to get your service inventoried. If you did not inventory, you're going to get another letter here in the next probably week. But there, I believe we had 6 lead service lines in the city that were identified. I think we had about 1,000 properties that did not get identified as to what their service was. So we're working through that, and I would say within the next 2 weeks you will be getting a letter where it will identify, or you will get a letter if you did not have it identified or you have lead or galvanized. If you're copper pipe, which most people are, you will not be getting an additional letter on that. There's also a project page on that on the city website where you can find out more information on it.
I was just gonna say too, like, if they do, what will we be doing?
So yeah, if you do have a lead service line, the city's planning on collecting all of our data, and then we're going to look through if we can get a city project to replace those lead service lines and try to work through and getting a grant for replacing those lead service lines. So we're going to work through that and see, or we're going to be applying for that for the next year. So,
And some of the new grants are really going all the way from the street all the way into the home, so really to try to have really no burden on the residents for those costs. Those would be the grants that we'd be pursuing. What percent of the water is consumed versus pumped or used?
I don't know if I would know the exact number for consumed versus pumped. So we pump about last year we pumped like 730 million gallons through the whole year. And we're kind of averaging somewhere right in that, a little bit lower, depending on how wet or dry the year is. Most of that water, obviously there's a lot of it that gets consumed. We're talking, some goes onto lawns for irrigation purposes, some goes into a lot of the manufacturing processes for cooling and everything like that. So I wouldn't have the exact number on what is consumed versus what is pumped.
Do we know what the infant population is in Northfield?
I would say last year, I believe Northfield Hospital and Clinics had about 360 children that were born. So every year, if we're averaging 360, it's, the population in town, I think the average household is around 2.5 people per household. So most families are having 1 or 2 children. That every roughly 2 years, there's probably another 350 families that have children under that age. So there's a continued change in people that do have them.
What will the pH of water be in our homes?
So the pH right now is like 7.4. I would say we're going to be trying to shoot for somewhere right around that 7 or somewhere in that same range of 7.4. So we're going to be kind of working through a lot of that, but a lot of it will be kind of dictated once we get the water treatment plant up and running. So we're going to have a lot of communication on that once the plant is actually running.
After the plant is constructed, will we be recommending that people bypass their softeners?
Yeah, I would say the recommendation is going to be to bypass them to begin with. So if you bypass them, you'll be able to see what the water hardness is in your home, and you're going to see if you like that level of hardness in your home. So you'll be able to test it without having to do any changes to your plumbing, and just really changing a valve. And then from there, the city's recommendation is that you do remove them, but you will have that decision up to yourself if you want to. And then we would just tell you that you would want to make sure that you're adjusting the settings on your water softener to make sure that they meet what our hardness is.
Do we have an estimate of how many homes do not have water treatment system, softener or something?
I would say, so like I've said kind of before, most of those carbon filters or water softeners are not plumbed to your drinking water. So there really wouldn't be a great way to estimate that. There are homes that do have those reverse osmosis systems, but we do not have an estimate for it. So.
Do your filters on the refrigerator, did I just have something?
No.
Do the filters on the refrigerator filter the manganese?
I would say refrigerator filters, it depends on the filter themselves. Most filters or carbon filters, they have an asterisk next to manganese on for treating for it. So most of them don't treat the level of manganese that we have in our water down to at 100 micrograms per liter. So you'd really have to look at the actual manufacturer and basically all the data on there to see if it would get down to that level.
Do we know what the annual cost is to operate this maintenance of this system, the water system?
So the whole water system, I think we're around, I want to say it's $2.4 million per year. The system itself is planned to be around $900,000 additional cost for annual operating, which is incorporated into those rates.
Why was this not a voter referendum?
So typically projects like this are not on a voter side, but I'll kind of defer to that now.
So the state law establishes the processes that are required for the types of debt instruments that cities might use to fund projects. And so Northfield, like many communities, follow the guidance of those laws. So this particular type of funding for this improvement does not require that. So we have representative government. We follow the state statute processes on the financing. So there are some that do require it. Fairly limited for city government on those in comparison to like the school district as an example, the referendum they have. For capital projects, they're mandated to go to the voters. Similarly, like our ice arena project a few years ago, that was a sales tax that we are using. State law mandated a sales tax, whereas the tool we're using now doesn't. In fact, the sales tax option is currently active, so we can't even use that tool in that project. But basically, we follow the state guidance and use our professional financial advisors on when we go to voters and when we just have our council approvals on it.
Will reverse osmosis remove all trace elements from the water?
I would say the reverse osmosis, so our system we're planning on having, so of the water that goes out of the system, it's going to be about 70% of it's going to use reverse osmosis. 30% will just be filtered water. And the reason we'll do that is just so that the water is not so corrosive that it'll eat away at your internal plumbing throughout the city. So the reverse osmosis system, I would say, it moves down to a certain size. I don't have the size in front of me.
0.001 micron.
So 0.001 micron is what it will remove down to. So any particle that's larger than that would be removed.
This is more on the biosolids wastewater side. Are there concerns with the biosolids or metals that are spread on farmers' fields?
So with our biosolids process, since we're that class A EQ, EQ standing for exceptional quality, we have metal limits on our biosolids that we can't have too many metals in it. So we have so low of metals in our biosolids that we are able to apply it pretty much anywhere. So that's the quality of our treatment that we have in Northfield for the biosolids. Not all systems meet that exceptional quality requirement.
You talk about the noise, vibration, smell, maybe construction and maybe post-construction.
Yeah, so smell, I would say there's not going to be smell. It's a water treatment plant, not a wastewater treatment plant, so drinking water. So shouldn't be any smell. Noise-wise, typically it's a fairly quiet neighbor. Everything's enclosed. There's not really anything outside that's going to be making major amounts of noise. And then construction-wise, obviously there will be construction going on at roughly 2.5-year construction for the water treatment plant. And that will, obviously there'll be vehicles moving in and out and stuff like that, and typical construction noises going on for that.
Has Bolton and Menk implemented a water treatment plant of this type of design?
Yes, they have. And St. Peter is one that for sure has.
Did you look at an alternative that uses microorganisms to treat the water?
We did not look through biological treatment for the drinking water side.
Why? Why didn't you?
Why didn't we? I would say it really wasn't it's not a typical treatment process on municipal sides. So cities as large as ours typically don't have that for a treatment option. Usually gravity filtration is the main portion, and then different options for softening. We use biological for our wastewater treatment plant, not for our water treatment.
Will our wastewater treatment plant last for another 20 years?
Yes, it's planned to be able to last for another 20 years. So we did a facility study back in 2021, I believe, is when that system was, or facility study was done, and we do have, at that point, it was around a 20-year expected life for that.
Do we know in 2027 when the new plant will come online?
No, we don't at this point. So we're going to give the contractor 30 months to construct the facility. So right now, it's bidding and will be awarded in January. So it'd be July is kind of when that roughly would be operating. So July of 2027. All right, so that is all the questions that we had.
You haven't answered
last-
mine yet.
You haven't answered mine yet.
Will additional staff be needed?
So staffing wise, so it was recommended that there would be 3 additional staff for the treatment plant. So there's 2 that have been hired already, and 1 will be hired further along in the project.
We want to thank everybody for attending, and if you want to, if you didn't answer your question, come up here.
Wait,
7:30.
let me
Marty, can you just talk about January 7th, we're going to have new city council.
We,
We're going to award this project on January 7th.
sir, if you could just, we want to thank everybody for their time tonight. If we didn't answer your questions, we'll be around here to, if you wanted to come up and ask any more, but we thank everybody for coming here tonight.
We are, I do also.
That's what we're doing. Come on, Gabe. You've
I do
done
want
this
to
before.
also encourage people that we will post this video on our project page as well as the presentation. And we'll be, based on the feedback we've got, we'll try and build an FAQ that frequently asked questions on there as well. And again, Dave was trying to rifle through a lot of questions and trying not to duplicate, so I'm sorry if we missed you. We do want to answer your questions though, so please come up if you feel like it wasn't answered thoroughly. We've got this meeting booked, this room booked till 8. We did intend on time for people to come meet with us individually, so we want to honor that commitment to you too. So thank you, appreciate your time, and come on
I
up.
think the people are entitled to know why you are rushing